I never thought the house where I spent my childhood building memories with my grandparents would become my battlefield. When I inherited this beautiful Victorian home at 18 after they passed away, I imagined filling it with love and laughter. 5 years later, when my mom remarried Roger, I welcomed the idea of having a big family. The house felt too empty for just two people anyway. But sometimes opening your heart and your home to others can lead to the most painful betrayal you never saw coming. Trefore bat jau kau chuyen, nai hai chotoi biet kach banjang theo doi tu jau, nhe jung quen han like va subscribe je kong bolun hung kau chuyen that kats. Va bai gio hai kung toi kam fa kach mut quiet jin sai lam ko the thay joy moi thun hu the now. My name is Jessica, and at 24, I thought I had my life figured out. I worked as a graphic designer from home, living in the same three-story Victorian house in Portland, Oregon, where my grandparents had raised me after my father left when I was 7. The house was worth about $750,000, and legally it was entirely mine. When my grandparents passed away when I was 18, they left everything to me, knowing how much I loved this place with its original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, and the garden where my grandmother taught me to grow roses. My mother Linda had been living with me since the inheritance. At 48, she deserved happiness after years of struggling as a single mom. When she met Roger Sullivan, a 52-year-old contractor, I genuinely supported their relationship. Roger seemed decent enough, and he came with two teenagers, Brandon 16 and Megan 14. The idea of having siblings, even step-siblings, excited me. The house was big enough for all of us, and I looked forward to holiday dinners and family game nights. The first few months after they moved in were actually pleasant. Roger was polite, his kids were reasonably well behaved, and my mom seemed happier than I had seen her in years. But slowly things started to shift in ways that made me uncomfortable. It began with Roger making suggestions about the house. He would walk around pointing at the antique wallpaper my grandmother had chosen, saying things like, "You know, Linda, this place could really use some modernizing. These old fixtures are probably worth something if we sold them." When I mentioned that I preferred to keep things as they were, he would smile and say, "Of course, Jessica. It is your house after all." But his tone suggested he thought I was being unreasonable. Brandon and Megan started acting like they owned the place. Brandon, a tall kid with an entitled attitude, complained that his room was too small and suggested I give him the master bedroom since he was growing and needed more space. When I explained that was my room, he rolled his eyes and muttered something about me being selfish. Megan, quieter but equally presumptuous, began using my art supplies without asking and rearranging the living room furniture to accommodate her gaming setup. The worst part was watching my mother change. Linda, who had always been my closest ally, started taking their side in every disagreement. When I complained about Brandon leaving his dirty dishes all over the kitchen, she would say, "Jessica, he is just a teenager. You need to be more understanding." When I found Megan had used my expensive tablet without permission, my mom defended her with, "She is just curious about your work. You should be flattered." The breaking point came when Roger suggested I move to the attic room so Brandon could have a bigger space. "It would just make more sense," he said, as if it were obvious. "Brandon is still growing, and you spend most of your time working anyway. The attic has great natural light for your art." My mother nodded along, adding, "It would really help the family dynamic, sweetheart." I felt like I was losing my mind. This was my house inherited from my grandparents who had loved me unconditionally. Yet here I was, being asked to accommodate everyone else's needs while mine were dismissed. Reluctantly, I moved to the smaller attic room, telling myself it was temporary and that family harmony was worth the sacrifice. But Roger was not done. A few weeks later, he sat me down with a proposal that made my blood run cold. "Jessica, I have been thinking. This house is too big for what we need, and frankly, it is not really set up for a modern family. What if we sold it and bought something more practical? We could split the proceeds, and everyone would have a fresh start." I stared at him in disbelief. Roger, this house has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandparents left it to me specifically because they knew how much it meant to me. I am not selling it. His friendly demeanor cracked slightly. Look, I understand you have sentimental attachments, but you need to think about what is best for the family unit. Your mother and I are married now, which makes this a family home, not just your personal museum. The tension in our house reached a boiling point during Brandon's 16th birthday party. Roger had planned this elaborate celebration without consulting me, inviting about 50 teenagers to my home. When I walked into my living room that Saturday evening, I found kids I did not know sprawled across my grandmother's antique furniture drinking soda that was already staining the Persian rug I had spent years learning to care for. "What is all this?" I asked Roger, trying to keep my voice calm. "It is Brandon's birthday party," he replied as if I was stupid for asking. "The kid deserves to celebrate with his friends." "In my house without asking me." Roger's face hardened. "This is a family home, Jessica. Brandon lives here, so he has every right to have friends over. You do not get to control every aspect of what happens here." I watched in horror as one of Brandon's friends accidentally knocked over a lamp that had belonged to my great-grandmother. When I rushed to check if it was damaged, Brandon laughed. "Relax, Jessica. It is just old junk anyway." "That junk is a family heirloom," I snapped. "Well, maybe it is time to get some new stuff." Megan chimed in from across the room where she was live streaming the party on her phone. When I turned to my mother for support, she avoided eye contact. "Jessica, let the kids have their fun. It is just one night. One night in my house with my things without my permission." Roger stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You need to check your attitude, young lady. You do not own this family, and you certainly do not get to dictate how we live our lives." "Actually, I do own this house," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "and I am getting really tired of being treated like a guest in my own home." That was when Roger exploded. "Your house. Your house. Do you have any idea how selfish you sound? Your mother and I have been contributing to bills, groceries, and maintenance for months. Brandon and Megan live here too. This is not your personal kingdom where you get to lord over everyone." I ran upstairs and returned with the property deed and inheritance documents. "Here," I said, throwing the papers on the coffee table. "Read these. My name is the only one on the deed. My grandparents left this house to me, not to anyone else." Linda finally spoke up, but not in my defense. "Jessica, how dare you wave those papers around like a weapon? We are your family. Families do not treat each other like landlords and tenants. Families also do not treat each other like unwelcome guests," I shot back. Roger picked up the documents, scanned them, and then crumpled them up. "I do not care what these papers say. You are acting like a spoiled brat, and it stops now. Either you learn to live as part of this family, accepting our rules and our decisions, or you can find somewhere else to live." The room fell silent except for the music still playing from Brandon's party. I looked at my mother, hoping she would finally stand up for me, but she was staring at the floor. "So that is it?" I asked. "You are giving me an ultimatum in my own house." "I am giving you a reality check," Roger replied. "You cannot hide behind those papers forever. This is about family, and if you cannot be part of this family, then maybe you do not belong here." I felt my world crashing down around me. The house my grandparents had lovingly left me was being turned into a prison where I had no voice and no rights. The mother who had raised me was choosing a man she had known for less than 2 years over the daughter who had supported her through everything. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I will not be part of a family that does not respect me." That was when my mother erupted. "Respect? You want to talk about respect? You have been nothing but difficult since Roger and the kids moved in. You nitpick everything they do. You refuse to compromise on anything, and now you are threatening to throw your own family out on the street. If this is how you want to act, then maybe you should leave. We do not need your negativity here." Roger smirked as he motioned to Brandon. "Come on, son. Help me get Jessica's things together. She has made her choice." I watched in stunned silence as this man and his son began collecting my belongings from around the house, throwing them into garbage bags and boxes. Megan continued filming the whole thing, giggling as she narrated for her social media followers. Drama alert: Jessica is getting evicted from her own house because she cannot handle having a real family. My mother did not even look at me as I packed my clothes and personal items. When I asked her how she could let this happen, she just shrugged. "You made this choice, Jessica. I tried to help you fit in, but you were determined to be difficult." By midnight, I was sitting in a hotel room across town surrounded by hastily packed belongings and trying to process what had just happened. My own mother had chosen her new husband over me. I had been kicked out of the house my grandparents had left me, the house where I had every legal right to live. The next morning, sitting in that sterile hotel room, I realized something important. I was done being the victim in this situation. Roger and my mother had made the mistake of thinking they could intimidate me into giving up my rights simply because they outnumbered me. They had forgotten one crucial detail: I actually owned that house. I spent the morning researching tenant rights and property law. Then I called Michael Thompson, a lawyer my grandfather had recommended years ago when he was updating his will. Michael was in his 60s, with decades of experience in property disputes, and he listened to my story with growing incredulity. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said, after I finished explaining. "Your mother's husband and his children have been living in your house, and when you refused to sell it, they physically removed you from the premises. That is exactly what happened. Jessica, what they did is illegal. This is not just about hurt feelings or family drama. They have essentially stolen your property. You have every right to reclaim your home, and I can help you do it legally." Michael explained the process. Since Roger, Linda, Brandon, and Megan were not on any lease and had no legal claim to the property, they were essentially squatters. I could serve them with an official eviction notice giving them 30 days to vacate. If they refused, I could have them legally removed. But they are my family. I said the word feeling strange in my mouth after everything that had happened. Jessica family does not treat family the way they treated you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is establish clear boundaries, even if it hurts. While researching my options, I discovered something interesting about Roger's financial situation. Public records showed he owed $45,000 in back taxes and had several liens against his credit. He was in no position to buy another house, which explained his desperation to get his hands on mine. I also learned that Linda had been telling people around town that she and Roger were planning to renovate and sell my house to start fresh somewhere more affordable. Apparently, they had already contacted a real estate agent about getting an appraisal. That afternoon, I drove past my house and saw Roger's truck in the driveway. Through the window, I could see him and Brandon rearranging furniture in what used to be my living room. They had completely redecorated, replacing my grandmother's carefully chosen antiques with Roger's modern furniture. It felt like watching strangers desecrate a grave. I called Michael immediately. "I want to start the eviction process today." The legal notice was served the following Tuesday. I was not there to see their faces when the sheriff's deputy handed them the official documents, but Michael called me afterward to report that Roger had been extremely agitated and made several threats. "What kind of threats?" I asked. "He said you would regret this decision and that family should stick together. He also mentioned something about you being an ungrateful child who did not deserve what your grandparents left you." That evening, Roger called me. His voice was shaking with rage when I answered the phone. "Jessica, this is insane. You are really going to evict your own mother over what, some hurt feelings?" "Over my house, Roger. The house you kicked me out of after I refused to sell it for you." "We can work this out," he said, his tone shifting to false reasonableness. "Come home and we will sit down and discuss this like adults." "I am not coming back until you and your kids are gone. You cannot do this to us. Where are we supposed to go? That is not my problem. You should have thought about that before you threw me out. Your mother is devastated, he said, playing what he thought was his trump card. My mother made her choice when she watched you throw my belongings into garbage bags. Roger's mask slipped completely. You selfish little bitch. After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us. Fine. But do not expect your mother to forgive you for this. I hung up and immediately called Michael to report the threatening phone call. He advised me to save the voicemail Roger left afterward, where he called me several more names and suggested I would pay for this betrayal. The 30-day eviction period felt like the longest month of my life. Every day I expected them to pack up and leave quietly, but Roger seemed determined to make this as difficult as possible. He filed a counterclaim arguing that he had tenant rights since he had been contributing to household expenses. Michael easily got that dismissed since there was no lease agreement and no documentation of any financial contributions. Linda called me twice during those 30 days. The first time she cried and begged me to reconsider. Jessica, please. We are family. Roger made a mistake, but we can work through this. Do not throw away our relationship over a house. Mom, it is not about the house. It is about respect. Roger threw me out of my own home and you let him. You chose him over me. I did not choose anyone. I was trying to keep the peace. By sacrificing me. The second call was angrier. Linda accused me of being vindictive and heartless. Your grandparents would be ashamed of what you are doing, she said. They raised you to be loving and generous, not petty and cruel. My grandparents left me that house because they trusted me to protect it. They would understand what I am doing. On day 29, Roger tried one last desperate move. He called the police and reported that I was harassing them. When the officers arrived at my hotel, I showed them the eviction notices, the property deed, and the documentation of Roger's threatening phone calls. The police informed Roger that he needed to vacate the premises immediately or face arrest for criminal trespass. On day 30, I met Michael at the house with a locksmith and a security team. Roger's truck was gone, but the front door was standing wide open. Inside the house looked like it had been ransacked. They had taken some of my grandmother's antiques, claiming they were family heirlooms that belonged to Linda too. The kitchen cabinets were left open and empty, and someone had carved "ungrateful" into the wooden banister. But they were gone, and the house was mine again. I spent the next week cleaning and assessing the damage. Some things could be repaired, others were lost forever, but I was home. The silence felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. For the first time in months, I could walk through my own house without feeling like I was intruding. Roger tried to break down the front door 2 weeks later. The security cameras I had installed caught everything, and the police arrested him for attempted breaking and entering. He spent 3 days in jail before posting bail, and the judge issued a restraining order requiring him to stay at least 500 feet from my property. 3 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Roger and Linda's marriage was falling apart. The financial stress of finding new housing combined with Roger's legal troubles had created constant fighting. Brandon was acting out at his new school, angry about having to leave his friends behind. Megan had stopped speaking to Linda, blaming her for ruining everything. I wish I could say I felt sorry for them, but mostly I felt relief. The people who had tried to steal my inheritance and my peace of mind were facing the consequences of their choices. I had not destroyed their family. They had done that themselves when they decided to treat me like an obstacle instead of a person. 6 months after reclaiming my house, I received a text message from Linda. Jessica, I know you probably do not want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I am sorry. I was wrong to let Roger treat you that way. I was wrong to choose him over you. I miss my daughter, and I hope someday you can forgive me. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Mom, I forgive you, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting. You taught me that actions have consequences, and this is the consequence of your action. Maybe someday we can rebuild our relationship, but it will have to be on different terms. She never responded to that message, but I meant every word. I also heard from Brandon, surprisingly. He sent me an Instagram message apologizing for his behavior and asking if he could visit sometime to talk things through. I appreciated the gesture, but I was not ready for that conversation. Some wounds need time to heal before you can safely examine them. As for Megan, she continued posting dramatic TikTok videos about her evil stepsister who stole her family's house. I blocked her on all social media platforms and tried not to let her narrative bother me. People who knew me understood the truth, and strangers' opinions did not matter. Renovating the house became my therapy. I restored my grandmother's wallpaper, refinished the hardwood floors that had been damaged during Roger's occupancy, and slowly brought back the warmth and character that had been stripped away. Each improvement felt like reclaiming another piece of my identity. I also started renting out the extra bedrooms, but this time, I was careful about who I allowed into my space. I interviewed potential tenants, thoroughly checking references and making sure they understood and respected house rules. The income helped with maintenance costs, and having respectful housemates made the big house feel alive again without feeling invaded. Therapy helped me process the emotional aftermath of being betrayed by my mother and manipulated by Roger. I learned that setting boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary for self-preservation. I learned that family relationships built on manipulation and disrespect are not worth preserving just because of blood ties or legal connections. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts again. When Roger first started making suggestions about changing the house, my gut told me something was wrong, but I ignored those feelings in favor of keeping the peace. I will never make that mistake again. Today my house feels like home again. I have coffee in the garden where my grandmother taught me about Rose's work in the attic studio, where the light really is perfect, and fall asleep in the bedroom that has always been mine. The silence is no longer empty. It is peaceful. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I had been less assertive, if I had allowed Roger to bully me into selling or signing over my inheritance. I might have lost everything my grandparents worked for, everything they trusted me to protect. Instead, I stood up for myself and discovered that I am stronger than I thought. The house my grandparents left me taught me that sometimes to protect what matters most, you have to be willing to stand alone. And you know what? That freedom, that peace of mind, that sense of self-respect, it is worth more than any relationship built on compromise of your fundamental dignity. I want to hear from all of you watching this. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? How did you handle a situation where people you loved tried to take advantage of your generosity? Share your stories in the comments below, because I know I am not the only one who has faced this kind of betrayal. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories that matter and share this with anyone who might need to hear that it is okay to protect yourself even from family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect, especially in your own home. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and do not let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you the villain.